Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isvaron, and with me today is Sal Puglisi, teacher with the Urban Assembly School for Emergency Management. Welcome, Sal.
How you doing, Heather?
Well, just to start out with, a little bit about your background, but tell us, how did you get into this teaching gig anyway?
Well, in 1997, I became a New York State emergency medical technician, and I worked for New York Presbyterian Hospital in the city, doing 911 calls throughout Manhattan. 2001 kind of changed a lot of that, being a first responder and survivor. I decided to go back to school, looking for a purpose. And I kind of accidentally fell into the New York City Teaching Fellows and became a New York City teacher.
And what surprised you the most about this newfound teaching gig?
Well, I was one of the kids that hated school growing up. My parents still joke to this day that I'm a teacher in New York City. I just hated school, hated high school, hated everything about school. And in a way that's kind of helped me because I've tried to make my classroom everything I didn't have when I went through the system. So I try to make it fun, engaging, lighthearted, and keep kids interested.
And what exactly do you teach?
I teach the 9th grade an Introduction to Emergency Management course. And then in the 12th grade, I assist with the Borough of Manhattan Community College in an EMT program. Mm.
And what kinds of youth are gravitating towards emergency management these days?
It's a loaded question, right? A lot has changed in the last year alone. For the most part, when we first started, it was a lot of children of first responders that knew what emergency management was, and we had a couple of legacy type kids. Post-pandemic, during the pandemic, I think people noticed us a lot more, and they started to inquire about a lot of the programs we had. I had been a CDC fellow in 2019, so when we started off the 2019 school year, I literally taught kids about pandemics, not realizing what was to come.
Wow.
So my students were definitely well prepared for COVID that year.
When we think about the gaps in Homeland Security, we see that there's this silver tsunami where we have a lot of the baby boomers leaving the job. They're just walking out the door and retiring. So these people coming in, what are they interested in when they take a career in public service like EMTs?
So the freshman year, we try to really introduce what emergency management is and the different type of careers that are offered. I don't think a lot of the youth realize emergency management's infused in almost every single industry, every business. So, you have kids that want to be in fashion and all these other pieces, and they're kind of like, what do you mean? And we go through the supply chains and all those different kind of, illustrations of how emergency management is a basis for a lot of these industries. I think COVID really re-energized a lot of kids. Especially my population in New York City, kids that lived in Corona, Queens, and Washington Heights, they really saw the worst of it. Mm-hmm. So they've come in with this, believe it or not, positive energy where they want to do something. Whether it's EMS or working, trying to build resilient communities. We do a lot of stuff with flooding and weather in New York. And they're starting to really get interested in a lot of these type of jobs that they never knew existed. Urban planning, kids are like, what's urban planning? We kind of break it down for them and they're like, wow, that's a really cool job. Yeah, and these are things that are attainable.
So you're not seeing actually a decline in enrollments. You're seeing
this
increasing?
Year we had a wait list. This is the first time since our inception that we had a wait list.
Well, that's encouraging.
It is.
And you can tell you love your job. What do you love most about your job?
God, I hope the kids aren't watching. Student interactions, believe it or not. I got into this to make an impact. I talk about 9/11 a lot. I'm one of the fortunate ones that has a job that I can literally practice the vow of never forget. I go in, I talk about partners, talk about 9/11, so that lives in my classroom. But sometimes there are kids that inspire me and impact me. And going through COVID and watching some kids lose close family members, re-energized me as well as to the mission of our school and why this is important.
Do you have a specific example?
Yes, there's a student named Supriya. She lost her dad during COVID and a couple other family members I found out later. Wow. And I was worried about her mindset, mental being, and a lot of us teachers were checking up on her, and she's a very strong young woman. And it got to the point where I was like, all right, well, what do we want to do? The first year anniversary is coming up for COVID. Is there something you guys want to organize? How do you feel as someone that's lost somebody? And her and a couple of students sat down at a table and they hashed out this plan to spell the word hope on our field with one light for each New York City victim. So these kids sat down with the help of a drone and some staff, and they wrote out 26-foot letters on our baseball field to write the word hope and make a star at life on the bottom. And it got some national news attention, and it really kind of inspired a lot of us that they were able to do something positive and remember the loved ones they lost.
Wow, that's incredible. So the work is meaningful, and it's really relevant.
Absolutely. We have, I guess, the country's only CPR team, teen CPR team.
Oh, interesting.
So we have a group of about 14 kids in the first year of their inception. We were sponsored by the Shippey Foundation. They gave us $25,000 as startup money. We purchased mannequins, equipment, and we turned it into a school project where kids were able to look at response times for high priority calls in New York City. And without teacher interference, they kind of started to see trends and patterns and was digging through the data. And we saw this inequity, and it was our mission is to not only discover these problems, but how do we solve them? And it took them a while, but they came up with the CPR team. And their idea was to go into these neighborhoods and do free hands-only CPR. Get them ready for that, extended response so that at least there's some type of viability for those patients. And we had a student who we found out was trained in 2019 and used it in the summer of 2019 to resuscitate a 3-year-old.
Oh my goodness. That's
so
fantastic.
We know our model is definitely working. We know for sure we've saved a life. And that was just through training, CPR training.
And I'm sure the national attention has probably excited other groups to emulate what you're doing.
Yes, we have a couple of schools that would like to replicate or join our CPR team and getting out to the communities and doing Stop the Bleed and just kind of getting preparedness back to that community grassroots kind of a thing, where you go to your local church, Starbucks and whatnot, and just kind of sit there for a couple hours and train people in emergency preparedness.
That's great. And what do you think that, going back to what you said about kids don't know what's available to them in terms of a career, how can you show them? How do you show them?
Yeah, we're very fortunate that we have a lot of partners in New York City that we have, NYPD Explorers, FDNY Explorers, FBI Explorers. We have all these different programs that have come in. We also have internships, which makes our school a little unique. We have kids that go to NYSEM and do a summer internship, and the folks at NYSEM have been amazing, and every year they just keep getting more and more responsibilities. And they're actually able to tackle these adult tasks and feel really confident when they get back to school senior year.
And what's the average age group of your people, of your students?
For interns, our interns are going to be juniors into seniors, so like 16 to 18.
And for those agency leads and trainers that are watching, tell us, what is the value of training these kids to do these adult tasks?
I can tell you firsthand, it puts a brand new perspective on a lot of things we do. I mean, even as a teacher, there are things we do that are just the way they are, and then a kid will come over and give you their point of view, and it's like, oh, never actually thought of it like that. And they just bring a completely different tech-savvy kind of buzz with them nowadays, where they can show you things that you didn't know you could do.
You don't feel old, do you?
Not at all, not at all. But the technology component alone is worth it, and taking the time to talk to a kid about job preparedness can completely change a trajectory in their career.
Change their life.
Big time.
So what are the challenges that you see for this workforce going into the job?
One of the things we've really been focusing and honing in on is job skills, those soft skills. Every time we're in a room with a bunch of emergency managers, the conversation always goes to, if I wanted to work for you, what would I need on my resume? So we've taken that, with our team at the school, and we've kind of infused a lot of skills into their daily curriculum, presentations, finding factual websites. Not a big deal to us adults, but for kids born with an iPhone in their hands, they really don't know how to tell what's real and what's fake sometimes.
Well, it's a great skill to have.
It is, and it's not easy. It's definitely something that's hard to get across.
And for a lot of us older people, right, some of those soft skills that seem to be hard, and what I hear, are the ones where they're trying to talk to other people face to face. Is that a real thing for you in this school?
Post-pandemic, yes. We've been very fortunate. We've opened up in New York City. Our school's opened September. It was a little touch and go in the beginning, a lot of social skills, right? You've been isolated for, as adults, we have challenges dealing with isolation. High school student, we had a freshman class that never made it to the school building once. New freshman class. We had, seniors that lost their junior year. So a lot of those social emotional challenges getting back in. But we've been very fortunate. They have conversations. The teachers have built a lot of social emotional learning components. So as we get back, it's a lot about, individualism and working together as a team and just kind of getting back into where we were pre-pandemic.
And if a school or an agency was interested in learning more about what you do, how would they do that? How would they emulate what you're doing?
To be quite honest, doing community outreach. My kids saw what was missing in their neighborhoods, and we partnered up with the American Heart Association now. We do a lot of work for them. Stop the Bleed where we're going this year, as long as COVID, continues to allow us to get out into the community. It's those little things that make a huge difference. Reaching out to high school programs, a health class. You can do all this stuff with a health class. And you can end up inspiring a whole new generation of healthcare providers just by going out and taking some time and a little bit of funds and a couple of cups of Starbucks. You can get a whole class energized.
That's fantastic. And public health is so much on the forefront now.
Yes.
I remember recruiting for public health people 10, 12 years ago, and they didn't really feel like they were part of the Homeland Security apparatus. I know that's all very evident and changed now,
Yes.
but thank you for what you do. Thank you for
Thank you.
inspiring the next workforce and the next generation. Appreciate you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.